Emperor Red Hair Shanks is actually part of Sword. What's the relationship between Shanks, Rosinante, the Gomu Gomu no Mi, and the Ope Ope no Mi? Sword, One Piece film Red, released in 2022, and the climax of the story One Piece. The two hot topics of One Piece right now are red-haired Shanks, who's the focus of the recently released movie, and the Gomu Gomu no Mi, which turned out to be the Nika model for the mythical Zoan type Hito Hito no Mi. After digging around the story of Shanks and the Gomu Gomu no Mi, we've come to the conclusion that Shanks is actually part of Sword, the Marine Headquarters' secret special force. Hello everyone, we're One Piece fanatics. Today we'd like to discuss in detail the theory that Shanks is part of Sword. We'll be discussing events leading to chapter 1044, so if you didn't read up to there yet, please stop the video now. Ready? Then let's start. Shanks' identity. The Gomu Gomu no Mi was eaten by our main character Monkey D. Luffy. In the first chapter, we learned that Shanks and his crew stole it from an enemy ship, and in chapter 1017, Who's Who, one of the Tobiropo of the Beast Pirates, makes a shocking revelation. 12 years ago, I failed to guard a devil fruit that was being transported in a government ship. I was shocked when Straw Hat Luffy gained fame 2 years ago and when I learned that the stolen Gomu Gomu no Mi had been eaten by him. So the ship from which Shanks stole the Gomu Gomu no Mi was a ship of the world government. And in chapter 1037, there's another shocking revelation made by the Five Elders. How else do you explain the world government going through the trouble of giving this specific devil fruit another name? They wanted to erase it from history. We think that the Five Elders are probably talking about the Gomu Gomu no Mi. But as they are saying those words, Zunisha appears in the background. We think that it means there's a connection between the power of the Gomu Gomu no Mi and Zunisha. All of this points to the fact that the Gomu Gomu no Mi is a very important fruit. But today, what we want to point out is how long ago Who's Who's story happened. In chapter 1017 of the weekly Shonen Jump edition, Who's Who says that the incident happened 12 years ago, but in volume 101 of the edited manga, it was changed to 13 years ago. We know that Luffy ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi 12 years ago, so the date of the Shonen Jump edition makes sense. But it seems that the date was deliberately changed to 13 years ago in the edited manga version. The timeline is something very important in One Piece. For example, one of its great mysteries is the Void Century. So, because the timeline was changed deliberately, it might mean that there's something important going on there. So maybe 13 years has some important meaning behind it. And if you comb through One Piece with this key number, then something amazing comes up. Shanks is part of Sword. So let's talk about this pirate. Shanks is a character that added a lot of mystery to the second half of the story. He's a pirate that Sengoku listens to, or that's able to request a meeting with the Five Elders. But why are we saying that Shanks is part of Sword? The key to this answer is an incident that happened 13 years ago, when Donquixote Rosinante stole the Ope Ope no Mi. But how on earth is that related to our question? Let's go over it together step by step. First of all, Shanks and Rosinante were both in a very similar situation 13 years ago, and Rosinante is part of Sword. So if we think that Shanks is like Rosinante and Rosinante is in Sword, then we can speculate that Shanks might also be in Sword. And here's how we came up with that. The two incidents of 13 years ago. Like we said before, 13 years ago hints to Shanks being part of Sword. 13 years ago, many important events took place in the world of One Piece. For example, Sanji ran away from his family, the Vinsmoke family, and Boa Hancock joined the Seven Warlords of the Sea. And there's one other memorable incident, and that's when the Ope Ope no Mi was eaten. Rosinante is the reason why Law ate the Ope Ope no Mi in the first place, and how this event took place is actually very similar to Shanks' involvement with the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Let's take a look at that now. So first of all, like we explained at the beginning, Shanks stole the Gomu Gomu no Mi from a world government ship 13 years ago. Then the fruit was eaten by accident by the 7-year-old Luffy, who Shanks then rescued from the Lord of the Coast. Also, Luffy's full name is Monkey D. Luffy, so he's part of the D family. So here's a summary of how it happened. We first have a devil fruit stolen from the world government. Said fruit is eaten by a child of the D family, and this child's life is later on saved by Shanks. That's the sequence of these events. So what about Rosinante and the Ope Ope no Mi? In chapter 765, Rosinante steals the Ope Ope no Mi, which is being traded by Drake's father, the marine-turned-pirate Diaz Barrels, to the world government. Rosinante doesn't steal the Ope Ope no Mi directly from the government, because they hadn't acquired it yet, but it's a devil fruit that the world government had their eyes on. I'm still going to die in 3 years. If I can get my hands on the Ope Ope no Mi, then it might even cure your amber lead poisoning. In the end, with this devil fruit, Rosinante was able to save Law, who only had 3 years to live because of amber lead poisoning. And even though Doflamingo found out about his brother's treachery, Rosinante still risked his life to save Law. Also, Law's real name is Trafalgar D. Water Law. So yeah, he's also part of the D family. So here's how we can summarize these events. There's a devil fruit stolen from the world government. A child of the D family eats this fruit, and this child's life is later on saved by Rosinante. So the events of Rosinante and the Ope Ope no Mi story can be summarized as the same way as Shanks and the Gomu Gomu no Mi's. It's worth 5 billion bellies! 10 barrels. We also learned that the Ope Ope no Mi is being traded for 5 billion bellies in chapter 766. On the other hand, we don't know the price of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but in the short story Romance Dawn that Oda-sensei published before One Piece, it's written that the fruit of a mysterious tree costs 5 billion bellies. So yeah, it seems that in Oda-sensei's mind, the Gomu Gomu no Mi costs the same as the Ope Ope no Mi, 5 billion bellies. In general, a normal devil fruit costs around 1 million bellies, so it can't be a coincidence that those two fruits are worth so much. We also learn from chapter 1037 that according to the 5 elders, the Gomu Gomu no Mi is nothing but a legend even for us, and that it hasn't awakened for centuries. Looking at the 5 elders' expression, when those words are spoken, we understand that the Gomu Gomu no Mi is seen as a potential threat to the world government. And something else seems to be a threat to the world government, and that's the Ope Ope no Mi, as it can give eternal youth. Since we've seen the world government involving itself with only these 2 fruits, we can safely assume that the Gomu Gomu no Mi and the Ope Ope no Mi are the first and second most important fruits in One Piece. So let's recap once more the story of Shanks and the Gomu Gomu no Mi, and the one of Rosinante and the Ope Ope no Mi. 1. A devil fruit was stolen from the world government. 2. This fruit was eaten by a child of the D family. And 3. This child's life was later on saved. So the Gomu Gomu no Mi and the Ope Ope no Mi are a perfect match. And if they're the most important fruits in the story, then there's a very high chance that Shanks and Rosinante are connected. From what we've already discussed, we already know that there are similarities between the both of them. So to prove that Shanks is part of Sword, we first have to prove that Rosinante is part of it. So let's take a closer look at Rosinante's story. Rosinante's identity. Rosinante, aka Corazon, was an elite officer of the Donquixote pirates. However, it was revealed in chapter 764 that he was a marine commander and worked undercover in his brother's pirate crew. We think that Rosinante is part of Sword, and we have 3 reasons to back our story. First, Rosinante's password is similar to Sword's passwords. Second, he worked undercover to spy on the Donquixote pirates. And third, Sengoku took Drake under his care. Let's look at those 3 points in more detail. So our first reason is that the password Rosinante used is similar to passwords Sword uses. Drake is one of the worst generation and appeared in the Wano country as one of the Tobiropo of the Beast Pirates. But in chapter 956, it was revealed that he is actually a captain of the Marine Headquarters' secret special force, Sword. At that time, he made contact with another member of Sword, Kobe. This is the conversation those two had at that time. It's me, Kobe. Oh yeah? C. Fog. So C and Fog are their passwords. As we know that they both work for Sword, we can assume those are Sword-related passwords. The same exact words never reappeared in the story, but in all of the chapters of the story, there's just 2 other characters that use a similar code. That was 13 years ago between Sengoku, Crackers, and Rosinante. Cookies, it's me. And both of their passwords are used twice, in chapter 764 and chapter 765, so it feels as if Oda-sensei wants to bring this to our attention. We think it's very similar to the password system by Sword, as the pair only mentions the words once to each other. So because Sengoku's and Rosinante's password system is very similar to the one Drake and Kobe used, we're pretty sure that those 2 are also part of Sword. The second reason why we think Rosinante is part of Sword is that he infiltrated the Donquixote pirates, captain of the Donquixote pirates. In order to stop the calamity you are planning on unleashing onto the world, I infiltrated your crew." With these words, Rosinante reveals that he was working undercover to spy on the Donquixote pirates. It seems that his purpose was to monitor the activities of the Donquixote pirates and pass on information to the Marines. This is very similar to what Sword Captain Drake did when he infiltrated the Beast Pirates. So, it's easy to assume that Rosinante spied on the Donquixote pirates as a member of Sword. And our third and final reason why we think Rosinante works for Sword is that Drake was taken in by Sengoku. As we've said already, Drake is a captain of Sword, but how did he join Sword in the first place? There's a clue in chapter 767 and on Drake's Vivre card. Remember the pirate we mentioned earlier that wanted to trade the Ope Ope no Mi? Well, it was Drake's father. Also, Drake used to go under the name Dory. But thanks to the conflict between Rosinante and Doflamingo, he managed to escape his father and was taken in by the Marines in chapter 767. Also, if you take a look at his Vivre card, it's written that he was taken in by Sengoku around this time as well. But what happened to Rosinante? You don't have any relatives. Well, then you can tag along with me if you want. Just before dying, Rosinante recalls how he was taken under Sengoku's wing, just like Drake. So it seems that both Drake and Rosinante joined the Marines because they were picked up by Sengoku. And as Drake is now a sword captain, it's not hard to guess that Rosinante also became a sword captain under the care of Sengoku. Don't you think that there's a lot of evidence pointing at Rosinante being part of Sword? Let's summarize what we've looked at so far. Rosinante used a password that is similar to the one Sword uses. He also infiltrated the Donquixote pirates, and like Drake, Rosinante was taken under the care of Sengoku. Because of these three reasons, we think that there's a very high chance that Rosinante was indeed part of Sword. Shanks is from Sword. Here's a recap of what we've been over so far in this video. We've first talked about the stories of both Shanks and the Gomu Gomu no Mi, and Rosinante and the Ope Ope no Mi that happened 13 years ago. They both stole a devil fruit from the world government. Children of the D family ate their fruits, and those children were later on saved by them. These three events are completely similar for both Rosinante and Shanks, right? Also because both the Gomu Gomu no Mi and the Ope Ope no Mi are the two most important fruits in One Piece. Then, there must also be a connection between Shanks and Rosinante. Also because Rosinante and Sword's password are similar, and because he also infiltrated the Donquixote pirates and was taken under the care of Sengoku, we think that he was part of Sword. From these events that happened 13 years ago, it seems that Rosinante and Shanks are closely related. And so if Rosinante was part of Sword, then there's also a very good chance that Shanks is also part of this secret organization. Shanks and Rosinante. So far, we've tried to explain how we came to the conclusion that Shanks is part of Sword. There are some other things that Shanks and Rosinante have in common, and that further supports our theory that Shanks is in Sword. Let's take a look at them now. Apart from the events that happened 13 years ago, these two have other things in common. The first one is that they're both children of celestial dragons. The second is that they were both taken in by the Marines. First of all, in chapter 722, we were shocked to find out that the Donquixote family, Rosinante's family, were celestial dragons. And in chapter 763, we learn of Rosinante's father, Saint Don Quixote Homing's decision. But I'm human. I have always been. This led to the Don Quixote family to lose its status as celestial dragons and become mortals. After that, they were horribly persecuted by people who had a grudge against the celestial dragons, and Rosinante's mother died of illness. After Doflamingo shot their father Homing, the 8-year-old Rosinante was left alone. Around that time, Marine Admiral Sengoku crossed paths with him and, like we mentioned before, took Rosinante under his wing. This explains how Rosinante is a descendant of the celestial dragons and came under the protection of Sengoku. And we think that Shanks also has the blood of celestial dragons and was picked up by the Marines. Here's a step-by-step explanation of how we came to this conclusion. First of all, Shanks has been on Roger's ship since he was a baby. Second, he's a celestial dragon child found on God Valley. And third, he was first found by Garp but then entrusted to Roger. Let's now take a closer look at those 3 points. So our first point is that Shanks has been on Roger's ship since he was a baby. It's been a while since I last held a baby, so their names are Momonosuke and Hiyori. Reminds me of the old days. In chapter 966, while holding baby Momonosuke, Roger says, "It's been a while," and Rayleigh also says, "Reminds me of the old days." From these words, we can understand that there might have been a baby on Roger's ship in the past. And the question here is, who exactly is that baby? We think it would be natural if that baby grew up and later on stayed on the ship. And in chapter 966, Shanks is already 13 years old, so there's a high possibility that the baby they were reminded of is Shanks. So yeah, that's why Shanks has been on Roger's ship since he was a baby. Our second point is that Shanks is a celestial dragon child that was found in God Valley. Like we said, since he was a baby, Shanks has been on Roger's ship. But when he was a baby 38 years ago, another important event took place known as the God Valley Incident. This 38-year-old incident was the consequence of protecting celestial dragons and their slaves on God Valley. It was there that Garp and Roger joined forces to defeat the rock pirates. Shanks is now 39 years old, so he was probably found as a baby between 39 or 37 years ago by Roger. In that short time frame, the only possibility is the God Valley incident from 38 years ago. Also, according to chapter 957, there were many celestial dragons there at the time. In conclusion, because there were many celestial dragons on God Valley, and because Shanks was found there, there's a very high chance that Shanks is also a descendant of celestial dragons. Our third point is that Shanks was actually first found by Garp and then entrusted to Roger. Like we explained just before, Shanks was probably found in God Valley, and so naturally he was taken in by Roger. But we think that there's a chance that he was actually not found by Roger first, but by Garp, and that it was only after that that Roger took him in, and that's because of what was revealed in chapter 551. Garp, I'm gonna be a dad. We've become like crewmates. Protect them. Just before his execution, Roger made his request to Garp, but he immediately said no. Don't be so selfish. But to this, Roger replied, I know you'll do it. Take care of my child. Because Garp and Roger faced each other in many battles, they must have had mutual respect for each other. If you analyze Roger's words, I know you'll do it. It feels like Garp owes Roger something. And we think that just like Roger entrusted his child to Garp, Garp entrusted Roger with a child in the past. And we think that this child was Shanks. So it's possible that Shanks was taken in by Garp on God Valley and for some unknown reason was left in the care of Roger. So like we've explained so far, Shanks was on Roger's ship from his childhood. He's a child of celestial dragons and was found on God Valley. It was Garp who first found him, but he was entrusted to Roger shortly after. So that's how we came to the conclusion that Shanks is a celestial dragon and was found by the Marines. And this is identical to Rosinante's situation. So because there's so many similarities between Shanks and Rosinante was part of Sword, it's not such a stretch to think that Shanks might have also been part of Sword. Also, if Shanks is indeed part of Sword, then a great mystery is solved. And that's Sengoku's words during the Summit War. Since it's red hair, I'll take responsibility. Shanks suddenly appears in the middle of the Summit War with the intention of stopping it. And Sengoku said that because it's Shanks' request, he will honor it. Don't you think that there's some hidden meaning behind that line? Why does one pirate have so much authority, and why does Sengoku trust him? The answer has to be because Shanks is part of Sword. Like we explained before, 13 years ago Rosinante reported to Sengoku, so it's probable that Sengoku has an important position in Sword. So if Shanks is really part of Sword, then it's easy to understand the hidden implications behind Sengoku's line, since it's you, red hair. It means that Shanks is Sengoku's trusted subordinate. And there's actually another clue, the name of Shanks' ship, Red Force. The word force in Red Force makes us think of something related to the army, like the Air Force. So the color red and the word army are linked together in Shanks' ship. And actually, there's someone else whose name brings these two elements together. The Marines will change. X Drake. His alias is Red Flag, and he is still part of the armed forces of the Marines, so there's again a link between the color red and the word army. Maybe the similarity between Shanks' ship, Red Force, and Drake's alias, Red Flag, show that there's a connection between them. We think that this connection is that they're both from Sword. But what do you think? Do you also believe that Shanks is part of Sword? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. We'd love to read what other fans think. That's it for today. See you in our next video.